Warm welcome to everybody who's joining us today. I'm Sarah Stockham, host of Simply Sarah, and I am delighted that you are here. This conversation with Frances Parker is one that I have been anticipating truly for weeks. She is somebody who comes from the corporate world and yet has so many other things that she has chosen to move into. She calls them chapters. Let me bring her right in. Frances, it is delightful to have you here. Thank you so much for carving time out of your schedule for this conversation.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm excited, very excited to be here in a positive way. Not that anxious butterfly in your stomach excited, although that's good too. But
yes. And I love your ability with words to be able to differentiate that excited, like the anxious part, or the, wow, this is just something that's really, really good and solid that's happening right now. I'm not so great at introducing in terms of getting all the different pieces and stuff in, and you have an incredible bio. I would love for you to introduce yourself, Frances.
Oh, thank you. So it's always so hard to figure out where to start when you're introducing yourself. Do you go way back or do you start now and then go backwards? So I think I'm going to talk about the chapters, as Sarah said. And I consider myself in my third chapter right now. And that chapter is one that I looked forward to with a lot of anticipation, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it and tell you that it's been as easy as I thought it was going to be. So it's been a path of a lot of more self-discovery and trying new things and failing at some of them and then getting back up and trying again, which has so many life lessons in it that it has just made me a much more complete person and a much more balanced person, which, as I'm able to reflect on it now, is what I was looking for. So it's one of those hindsight's always 2020. But I got here by spending the first part of my life as an Army brat, a child who moved all the time, which greatly impacted my sense of adventure, my wanting to learn more about people and what motivates them, what drives them, just how they live, because we're all so different. That also led me to wanting to help people. And so my education is as a pharmacist, which actually surprises a lot of people to know that. But I love that profession. I've stayed connected to it throughout my career in one way or another. I'm not as connected right now, so that is part of what changed. But it was that wanting to help people and make a difference in their lives that led me to that career path. Plus, I'm very science oriented. So that was the beginning. And then I launched, I would say, in my second chapter was I really took the time in my undergraduate. I ended up working, and then I went back to graduate school and I had my master's. And then I got into the corporate world and I stayed in pharmaceuticals, but I took on all kinds of roles. So I became a jack of all trades, trying to learn everything. And I got away from the clinical side, but I was always involved in something that had to do with the patient, or as we would call it now, client experience, because I'm in a different place. So I've had roles from supply chain to customer experience to things that are just really outside the norm of a typical pharmacist career. But I used all my business training, because I do have a master's, and just took advantage of the opportunities that were presented along the way. That doesn't mean that there wasn't hard work and a lot that I put into that. And it's actually also interesting to me now to reflect on it and realize that I was breaking some of those ceilings and going through some of that as women, as we rise in corporate, it wasn't always that usual to have women around you, although there were, but we had to band together. So I'm glad to see we're still making strides in women having leadership positions. And so if I come back to this chapter in my life, when I left my corporate career after being there for 25 plus years, I put the plus on there, I knew that I wanted to continue to help people lead better lives. I also realized that I wanted to make stronger leaders, and we can all be leaders. I just found that the workplace is still filled with people that aren't the best people managers and honestly aren't always the best leaders. And I also discovered that it's sometimes because they don't know what they don't know. And so they need to learn. And that has been one of my biggest lessons, is not assuming that everybody knows everything that I know. But that, I would say, another big lesson is that we all have room to be our authentic selves and yet grow and become better people.
Mm.
That's kind of a long-winded, but somewhat of a nutshell of who I am.
Frances, the parts that I pick up that just so resonate with my story and so many other people's story is that it's harder than what you think, or it takes longer perhaps. But
Yes.
the choice to fail forward, to not stop and fall backwards and just say, I'm done, right? To find the pieces of it that work, that make your heart happy, that make your soul sing, and to take those pieces and find another reiteration of how to pull those together in a different way. And then I also love you talking about women in leadership, or women working together in the corporate world and needing to find each other and needing to have each other's back and have conversations that sometimes can be difficult conversations, but yet so incredibly necessary. I know that when I was mentoring new teachers, that there were conversations that were difficult to have. One of them was, if you're teaching high school and you dress like the high schoolers, there's a possibility that you're not feeling as respected as you could be, right? As a result of how you're dressing.
Right.
Super sensitive topic, totally get it. But yet, as somebody who's been a little further along in that particular field, to say just something to consider, think about it, be curious about it, right? So I love that you're talking about it from a corporate standpoint of being able to have those kinds of conversations, or different ones, but ones that are helping other people to be able together to move the conversation forward so that people can be learning. And then leadership. Wow. I love that you are in a place, yes, based on being an Army brat and moving around. And I moved around a lot as a kid as well, being that curious about other people and coming to that point of realizing that the assumption that the other person knows or sees the world from your vantage point is one that is okay to let go of.
Yeah, it was a big one. That whole vantage point and the assumptions that we make, and just surrounded daily by reminders of not making assumptions.
Mm.
Just, it's so easy to do. It's a reactionary, innate thing to do, and yet we have to stop ourselves because assumptions come with some sort of judgment most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we really don't know. We
Yeah.
really don't know what's happening in other people's lives, or where they've been, or what they know and don't know. We think we do, but we don't. Most
So
of the
very true. And I've also noticed that even when I ask somebody for clarification, sometimes they are surprised to actually have somebody ask them. We just have lived so long in this assumption that if you live in this neighborhood, or if you went to this particular school, or if you have this kind of education, and that just is something that I think is really time for us to begin to gently begin to ask questions of other people, just to find out a little bit more information. I know that I was texting with somebody in South Africa this morning, and I used the word clarification because I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding what she was saying to me. We were using the same language. I just wanted to make sure that I was getting the message that she was fully sending, right? How powerful that is. I would love for you to share, were there people in your growing up experience who modeled for you having different chapters in their life?
Mm. Growing up, I don't know that that was so much growing up. The people who come to mind were actually within my time in my career, in my corporate career, people who really chose some different paths. And there were the people who just stayed in corporate and continued to go up. And there were those who realized that it didn't fit for whatever reason in their lives at that time. And I think that's what happens to many of us. Life happens and circumstances change. I do feel like the world is much easier for, as a working person, to take the leap and make and adapt to that change than it might have been. It was really risky 20 years ago or so. Now it's a little less risky right now to think about starting on your own or being. It's still super scary. I get that, but so there were a couple of people who in my life. One was my next door neighbor who became my daughter's godmother, who is still to this day one of the most precious people in my life. And she reinvented herself at least 3 times. And I was like, how are you doing that? That's so brave. That's so courageous. And I just was in awe. But so she definitely modeled the way of being brave and courageous and doing what she felt she needed to do as life threw her some major curveballs. And she adjusted to them for a variety of reasons. And then there were a couple of other women who were brave enough to kind of buck corporate. And while I don't want to bash corporate at all, that's actually where a lot of my clients live. And there's a lot of benefit. And we need strong people, strong leaders in corporate businesses.
Yes.
But they were, I mean, I definitely think we shouldn't bash being a corporate executive or leader or manager or director in any way, because it's so powerful in terms of what we need. And we need people in there who are people-centered, and we talk about heart-centered, and it's often like you can't be heart-centered and be in corporate, and I disagree. Right. So it's the people who bucked some of that I also watched and said, how are you marrying the two? Because you're really having to go against what were some norms and a lot of masculinity in the corporate world, maybe is one of the ways to put it. And how do you buck some of that masculinity and bring in some balance to it, which I do believe we've done a lot more of since I started, which is a long time ago. And so I was, one of the things that I pride myself on is that I have been a continuous learner my whole life. Yes. And that's not just book learning, but it's trying to watch if I see something in someone else that I really am in awe of, and I think, wow, that is really interesting or fascinating, or how in the world did they do that? I don't think I could.
Right.
Then I take that and really try and dig a little deeper to understand how they got there, or what they're doing, or what would it take, instead of me assuming that I couldn't. And some of it is like, I'm not a morning person. I've tried several times. I don't know if I'm going to ever flip that switch, but I have tried. And so it becomes more of a conscious decision than no, I can't be.
Right.
So that's, I think it's just really been a few key people, but then watching elements of other people and saying, how do I learn and emulate and become a little more like that if it's something that I admire.
I love that you are being conscious about what you admire, and that you are taking note of that and not allowing other people's conversations around you, whether it's in person or it is on television or wherever, right? You're not allowing that other people's opinions to dampen what you admire, and that you seek after that, you look for, and to further, to be able to pull those qualities into your own life in such a powerful way. My husband comes from the corporate world, and there were times, he's left-handed, and there were times that the people who were running the company were left-handed, all of them, and there was such a different vibe and way of communicating than there was when there were people who were in the top positions who were right-handed. And I just found that in itself just to be interesting.
Right? That's pretty fascinating.
Yes. I remember going to a Christmas party, and every single person who was in leadership at that particular company at that particular time, every single one of them was left-handed. And it was just amazing to watch a room full of left-handed corporate executives talking together and enjoying each other's company, and being able, because what we know about the brain is in utero, our brains go through these beautiful washes. And so the people who have the most division between the brain, as I understand it, are people who are right-handed men who can just sit with something. And during World War II, there was a group of them that literally had to be told it's time to eat, it's time to shower. They were scientists working on really important things. And then next is right-handed women who have a little bit more, they can hold a few more pieces of conversations and things together. And then it goes to left-handed men who are able to hold more pieces together. And then the ones who I really hurt for so often are left-handed women, because they are able to hold the most information at the same time and see how they could possibly work those pieces together. And here I am, a right-handed woman. I just want to have some decisions made, right? And so coming to those places of understanding and giving space and grace for, even in the corporate world, we are humans first.
Right.
And then we work, right? And so
Right.
and I personally believe that the gift of working is to encourage and up-level other people's lives. And that happens, I have seen it time and time again in the corporate world. And as you talk about heart-centered, I would love for you to share more of what does that look like in your experience, to have somebody who is in a position of leadership, powerful leadership, but who is also heart-centered.
There's a few things that come to mind quickly, and one would be really wanting to know who I am. That would be wanting to know me as a whole person, not just what motivates me to be a good employee, but what motivates me to be a good human. So what do I like outside of work? What do I want outside of just a job? Because I do think in the long run, even if you call it a career, many days it's a job. So that's important to me. I think understanding the aspects of one's, not just motivations, but one's skills too, and their personality, to know then how does their brain work? How do they think? How do they process? That may have to do with communication as well, that you hit on just a little. So how do I want to be talked to? I'm sure you've talked about love languages on this program before, and that was when I discovered that. That was an aha for me. One of those moments where you realize, another one of those moments where you realize not everybody thinks like me or wants to be rewarded in the same way as me. So that's, to me, heart-centered, is really trying to know somebody. And I would say one of my key words, and you used it already in this conversation, is curious and inquisitive. And so that is, to me, also at the core of being heart-centered, because that goes back to I don't want to make assumptions and judgments, and I want to be curious about who you are and what you want to share with me. That is also very much at the core. I just have to add, though, because I always think this is funny, and it shows different perspectives. I have a 21-year-old daughter, and I learn a lot from her daily.
Yes.
In many ways. So I say that I'm curious, but this is a classic example of, she sees it from a different way, and she says, "You're nosy, Mom." And I'm like, I'm not nosy. I genuinely care and I want to know. But it is interesting in how we communicate and how it's seen and felt and heard. So I have to be different. I have to be careful when I start getting really inquisitive, that it doesn't appear and someone's not going to take it. It was just this awakening for me that for some, that can appear that you're being nosy because they're private and introverted and they're not sharers. Right. So it was one of those, again, where I became defensive, like, I'm not nosy. But it was another one of those big moments where I was like, okay, that was a call out that I need to pay attention to.
And I have found when my daughter also will share pieces of information like that with me that are so helpful for me to be able to see the world through other eyes. And so one of the things that I have chosen to do is, when she shares these concepts with me, like your daughter shared with you, is to say, I'm not being nosy, or I'm trying to not be nosy, but I'm curious. And by doing that, putting that out there, then seems to open up a bit at times of conversation by front loading, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have someone else in my life who says, if you will tell somebody what's going to happen, that they can walk through anything with you. So if you are mentoring somebody or that you are leading them in a way and you let them know they're going to be, these different pieces are going to happen along the way. I'm going to be asking questions. It's
Right.
not that I'm nosy, but I'm looking for information to help guide our conversation forward. Putting it in context can also be incredibly helpful in that process.
Absolutely. So I have my classic example of that I use right now is, we'll get into it, but I do accountability coaching. And that word is scares everybody. Accountability, don't like it. Don't really want it all the time, even if I know I need it. And one of the key conversations we have to have in the beginning is, how do you want me to hold you accountable and in what manner? And so I said, think of it as the scale of a drill sergeant is over here. So, and
Yes.
your fairy godmother is over here that always lets you off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
Where in that spectrum do you need in a time where you haven't done what you said you wanted to do and you're not committing to yourself?
Right.
How do you want me to act? Because I would act in a certain way, but it's not about me, it's about you. And so
Right.
having them choose. So that context is really important, and often in many of the things we do as coaching and coaching.
Yes. Oh, so powerful. Let's get into it. Tell us about this third chapter, this accountability chapter that you have totally created. It's inspiring to me. When we met through Donna Leffler, she was working on some things and said, Sarah, I'm working on, cleaning my closet. I have to do this, and I was inspired by that, to the point after I finished my conversation with Donna that I then began working on my desk and closet as well, and just thought, how interesting when one person talks about, hey, I'm doing this and I'm being really serious about this, to be able to
Yeah.
reflect into our own lives and say, I wonder if this is something that I want to be working on as well. So how did you get to this accountability coach place?
Great. Well, we talked about trying to find different paths, and I've been coaching for a while now and trying to find the niche. And in all honesty, and sometimes getting not frustrated with my clients, but frustrated in that things weren't sticking. So they were learning and they were transforming, and then we would stop, and I would learn, because I follow up, I would learn in 3 to 6 months they were back to the habits that they had been trying to break. And I was trying to figure out what's really happening. Why are things not sticking? And those were longer engagements, 3 to 6 months engagements. And what I discovered, and what I think, to your point, that I've stumbled upon, is that often we have something that's blocking us, and we usually have one big project or one something that's sitting on our back burner that's holding us back, that is just sitting there. And whether we know it or not, it's the thing that is just gnawing on us all the time and pulling our shoulders down, and we can't cross the finish line with it. We may have stopped and started several times. We don't have a lot of belief that we're going to get through it. And so what I have is a 30-day program. It can extend to 90 dependent on the size of the project. But we meet for 30 minutes at the beginning to really set what you want to accomplish. And then I am your cheerleader and your supporter. And as I mentioned, we work through, how are we going to work together? And we meet for 15 minutes almost every day via Zoom, or sometimes we can do some video chats in other ways. But the point is that and I have a system that you have to come into and track 2 of your metrics, 2 of your goals on a daily basis. So you've committed, we've made sure that it's realistic and achievable. So we do make sure in the beginning, that's the point of the 30-minute, that you haven't set up to do something that you really don't have the time to do. That's the other thing, is it needs to be something that you can get done in about under an hour every day, because realistically, this is what I'm diverting a little bit, but we tend to take on something new and never take anything away, and therefore it doesn't get done. So there's a lot that happens in those first 30 minutes to make sure that what we're doing.
Yes.
And as you start to go, the first 2 days, 3 days, everybody's excited. And it's like New Year's resolutions, though. Everybody stops around day 10.
Yeah.
So the 30 days is really nice, because you get the first week and then you start to run into that resistance. And being able to work with somebody and call out that resistance it is amazing what gets uncovered. So I have been astonished myself. I think it wasn't something that I had planned on happening during this, but there's typically some emotional baggage, honestly, that needs to get processed through as well. And so it's been nice to have a little bit of those ahas come out and be able to help people work through them and release and let go by continuing to work through the project. So typically, if you keep your commitment and keep going and you finish something and you have this outcome, that emotional baggage gets released. And if you can forgive yourself and let go of it, the letting go is easier, and then forgive yourself for having it,
Yes.
then you are able to hold on to that pattern and that habit and consistency for a longer period of time. So it's interesting also because you mentioned it has been decluttering. It has been taking lunch every day because I wasn't doing any self-care as a busy person. It has been around a particular writing assignment, marketing program, or something that some entrepreneur wanted to put together, but they just weren't getting it done. Maybe it's building a course or something like that. So the gambit, I think that's what surprised me, is the niche is really that you need to get it done or want to get it done in a short period of time. The topic or what the project is can be molded to fit.
Yes.
So I was looking for the project being what my niche was, and really the niche is the methodology.
Mm. Frances, that's just so powerful. We're putting across the bottom the way people can get a hold of you, can learn more about you. What you are doing, I truly think, is a powerful, powerful thing. And I don't know if you have gotten to the place yet, or if you want to, being able to train other people, that you become a trainer of trainers, methodology. But with your background and your experience, I fully see you expanding this niche, because that, I believe you are onto something that is really, really exciting, because it doesn't matter the project. It matters the actions, right?
Yeah. And I think that was my, wow, that was my aha, is that we all, at some point in time in our lives too, and you've kind of led up to this, we need that support. We're going through something, and we need to get that lift, that thing off of to be able to move to that next place we want to be. And often it's whatever's sitting on that back burner.
And for me, it's what's laying on my heart. I can feel that there's something there that I'm supposed to be working on, but how do I create the space and time to do that? And I love how you're also talking about the emotional piece, because action and emotions really do flow pretty much together. If I am resistant with something because of my emotion, there's a really hard time, or I'm just going to do it and have a really undesirable attitude as I'm doing it, and then I'm not happy with the outcome. And if I had gone back and worked on the emotion part of it, if I had done some of that, even just to recognize, figure out exactly what that emotion is, do the granularization with the emotion to figure out exactly what it is. And some things we just have to do, right? Growing up in Africa, every single Sunday morning, sitting at the table for breakfast was a quinine medication for us. It was anti-malarial, and it tasted horrible. But every single Sunday morning it was there, and every single Sunday we took it because it made a difference in our health, as we were living in a very mosquito-rich area. And so there were things that we learned to do, like Dad used to sing to us just a spoonful of sugar, and he would be taking it and putting it into jam for us. And so, but still you had to get it right down, or you still got that really super bitter flavoring. So there are these emotions with the actions, finding ways to be able to acknowledge the emotion, honor yourself in that place. The emotions are not bad in and of themselves. They are merely reflecting, for me, for us, how we feel about something. And then to be able to decide what we want to do with that emotion. And I know that for me, sometimes I'll pick up a large rock. This sounds kind of odd, perhaps, but this works for me. And somebody else taught it to me, and it worked for them as well. Pick up a large rock and just say, okay, I know that the emotion is, or I sense that the emotion is that I am disappointed. And so what is it disappointment that you have to share with me? What is it what do you want me to notice and learn and experience right now? And
Yeah.
having that conversation really can be very, very helpful for me to be able to then take the action, to be able to move into a space that's more lighthearted, which will then gift me the outcome that I'm more happy with.
Right. Right. As you're speaking, the thing that comes to mind for me, two things. One, I don't, we've talked a little about language and clear communication, and emotions are something that we have a very narrow language for typically.
Mm.
And one of the tools that I like to use a lot with clients is I actually use Byron Katie's emotional sheet. And the reason I chose hers is so many of them have more words describing negative emotions than positive, but hers is very balanced, and it's a front sheet and back sheet, and every word on there is listing an emotion. But she'll take the word sad and have 15 more words for sad. And the deeper we can go to understand what that emotion is that we're feeling, the more we can figure out its corollary or opposite of how we want to feel. And that's one of the things that I have people really think about in the beginning as well, is how do you want to feel? Not just what the outcome of this will be, but how do you want to feel at the end of 30 days?
Yes.
How do you feel now, and how do you want to feel?
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't taken the time to go that deep. So
right.
It's a good exercise.
I have also found that when I have, each morning I get up and I spend some time journaling, and part of that journaling is looking at my goals and desires and things that have been on my heart. And some of those are physical, some of those are definitely business. Simply Sarah is definitely part of that. My Reiki business, other pieces are in there. And as I look at those, and every Monday writing them out again, taking the time to do that, really coming into that space of how do I want to feel at the end of finishing up this little piece that I'm going to do today. And yesterday I was going to spend 1 hour watching little videos on YouTube if needed. I was committing an hour to be able to figure out how to be able to take some information from one place and be able to move it into another place. And it was just a completely different way of doing things. And I have people in my world who were offering to help. And so I knew that I could reach out, right? But I just thought, I'm going to invest some time first so that I have the language, so that if I'm not able to do this and migrate things over, that I at least have the language that they know how to speak already. And so I love how you talk about that typically we have a very narrow language for our emotions, but we can also have narrow languages for things that we don't necessarily enjoy doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or that we're not familiar with, because we all live in some sort of bubble, whether we want to or not, right? Our lives are just around certain communities and just the way we live. We have bubbles. And so that could be something that is completely outside of your norm of the work you do or the way you live or the community that you're in. And so, it's good to try and learn something about it before jumping all the way in.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And this kind of dovetails into my next question, Frances. If somebody has never, ever, ever had anybody that's ever held them accountable for what they are working on, and they just haven't used that muscle, it's something that they think is maybe a scary word, and that they're just trying to wrap their brain around what that could possibly look like without it completely feeling like there was a boot on their neck. What advice would you give to that person to help them move through that birthing process from, gosh, it sounds like it's possible, but I just don't think it's for me, into a place of them being more open to have a conversation with you or somebody else?
Yeah. There's a few things that come to mind. First of all, I do believe there's still a section of people that don't really understand how coaching can benefit them. And I always point back to how the most elite in any profession has had a coach in their life, because we don't know what we don't know. and we typically can't get better without learning from others. Books are one thing, but really somebody steering us and guiding us. You can call them mentors, you can call them advocates, you can call them advisors. Those are all other words for coaches in my mind, and we typically
Yes.
think of coaches in the sports world, but that is true whether in all kinds of places, so not just in sporting. The second piece is, and one of the words that I used was someone who is your mentor or advocate. Those are two different words, and so I think of advocate more when I think of what accountability coaching is. It's somebody who believes in you more than you believe in yourself often.
Yes.
And that is something most of us don't grace ourselves with. We almost feel like we don't deserve to have an advocate. And we all deserve to have an advocate because our brains are wired to protect ourselves. So we tend to we let the negative stuff stick and the positive stuff just slides off like we have Teflon coating. And our brains want to protect us from risk. So they don't like to do the scary things.
Right.
And an advocate can help you see when your brain is taking over in a way that isn't perhaps beneficial to you. I think also, just as importantly, an advocate can see if they get to know you, much like we have just in this conversation, they can see a different level of you, a different side of you, and perhaps a piece of you that you are either diminishing or ignoring or just haven't given full celebration to. And so that to me is and I guess the third would be, and I think this is important, is your cheerleader. And I was never the rah-rah cheerleader on the sidelines. It's more, and you may have hit on this, but I'm there to help you celebrate those small wins along the way. We don't celebrate often enough. So if you told me you were going to get something done and then you get it done, I'm going to have us spend just a minute at least celebrating that, because that's really worthy of celebration. You lived up to your commitment. You got it done. It wasn't easy. And we need those cheerleaders in our lives too, because otherwise many of us don't have cheerleaders in our lives. So I would say it's the coach, it's the advocate, and it's the cheerleader. And it's those combination of things that you just aren't going to get from sitting by yourself doing whatever you're trying to do.
Yes.
And we all deserve to have somebody in our court when we're going through something hard.
So, well.
It doesn't just have to be hard. I mean, it's just, I think hard comes with different definitions, so be careful how I do that. But typically, again, if it's been something you've been procrastinating or you haven't done and you want some support in getting it done, then there's something there that I'm going to put a label of it's hard for you on.
And I think that that's just such a great way of saying that space of resistance, because you feel like you're trying to push it forward, and that is difficult, and there's a hardness that can come along with that, and lack of sleep, and desire to take on all the other kinds of things, the binge eating, the finding the alcohol, the just choosing to sleep, the binge watching television, whatever it happens to be, just something to not have to do that, whatever that feels in that moment hard, because it feels like we're not making progress forward. One of the things that I have more recently begun doing at the end of the day is to write the word gain out and then to write my little gains. And that for me has been just a small celebration, but just to kind of go, hey, I'm getting some things done. This is feeling good.
Right.
And so just for myself, just being aware, because you're absolutely right. Unless somebody is having a conversation with you about what are you working on right now and what have you gotten done, which is what you're doing with accountability to some degree, they aren't there. They don't know that it's time to celebrate something. Right. And they're not celebrating you because they don't like you. They just don't know. They're not informed. And
we save the celebration till the big thing is done, right? Till it's all the way through and then done. And then often, so one of the things in my program is you do have to set a reward for yourself that you decide on before you get started.
Yes.
And often I get to the end and people are like, well, I'm not going to do the reward. And I'm like, oh, yes, you are.
Yes.
Yes, you are. You know, well, they're like, I don't need it. I go, that's not, I mean, it's also need is a, if you don't take the celebration, you don't take the time to do it, you are diminishing your results. And it's so many of us are like, I don't need to celebrate. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's just an interesting conversation to have with people. I think
Yes.
we can do a lot more celebrating. And it doesn't mean that you go out and have a big party or that you buy something really expensive or
Yes.
that, you know, you binge drink or whatever. It doesn't have to be,
Right.
because too
Yes.
often I think we do celebrate with food and alcohol and things that aren't necessarily good for us.
Right.
Um, I like, you know, to your point, it can be journaling, it can be taking, go do, I love to craft, but this is one of mine. I need to carve the time out. And I'm learning to find all the things that I can do in 10 minutes to celebrate or 20 minutes to celebrate or an hour. So I have a list of things that if I
Yes.
want to, you know, take some time out for me, what do those look like?
Yes.
And so we can take a take a walk. That's not only good for you, but healthy, and it's time for yourself. Listen to an audiobook while you're on. Do what makes you happy, and that is your celebration.
Yes. And I think having celebrations that you can do by yourself on your own property, in your own space, I think is really, really healthy to develop that list. Because if you are determined that you're going to do something with somebody else and they happen to get sick, then what do you do? And
Right.
for me, that celebration is so about honoring ourselves. We're honoring our word that we said that when we got to the end, we were going to do this other step. And so we put the word celebration on it just to say this is the period, right? Here's the whole long paragraph, and here is the period at the end. And if we don't, having taught elementary school, if you don't put the period on the end, you just have a run-on sentence, right? And so what you want to do is
I
move.
love that. I'm taking that. You have to put the period on the end to make it an ending and not a run on. Yeah, I love that's
Exactly.
perfect. That's
Because
fantastic.
otherwise we are just running from one thing into the next. And
Yeah.
there needs to be a space of breath that
Yes.
says, I am taking this breath because I have earned it. And this next thing I'm going to start, maybe in 15 minutes, can start in 15 minutes, but I'm celebrating this space in time because it happened, because I did it, because I followed through. And I love your idea. I grew up with somebody who was anorexic and somebody who was morbidly obese in the same household.
Mm.
And so I really, really respect what you're saying about it doesn't need to be about food. It doesn't need to
No.
be about alcohol. It doesn't need to be about those kinds of things, to find other things that we can use to be able to appreciate and enjoy. For me this afternoon, I'm going to spend some time later today working on, I have just a small section of my garden that I want to
Mm.
remove the old whatever that was growing there, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I'm going to be doing as my celebration. And I've been talking to myself about listening to books while I'm out there working, and I still haven't done it. Years later, right? I've been enjoying gardening for years in my life, for years and decades, and I still just am not to the point that I want to be listening to something else when I'm out there doing it. In part because I love the sound of nature around
Right.
me,
Yeah.
and in part it's the time that spirit and I have
Right.
conversations. And
Yeah.
so maybe
There
something.
is a balance there. I absolutely think that there are, because there's times we just need to hear no thoughts, our own thoughts,
Mhm.
or whatever spirit, you know, whatever you believe in is whispering to you, you
Yeah.
know. So, um, but I will say, I have read through, because I listen to books.
Mhm.
So I have gotten through 4 books already this year, which for me is a lot.
It's pretty.
And it's a great balance to doing the dishes or even 30-minute car rides.
Yes.
Um, and it's one of my fun, you know, it's one of the
Mhm.
things that is just bringing me joy. So there is a balance though too. You know, I do think gardening for me is also the grounding is getting your hands and feet in the earth and connecting to that. And so
Yes.
there's also, I mean, that's why I like to have my list,
Mhm.
because there's also a big balance. One is a 10-minute do a dance party,
Yes.
when no one's
Love
watching.
that. Yes.
One could be doodling, one can be a walk. I mean, there's a balance of things because we need different things at different times. Our energy levels are different, what we have the time for and what we have the energy for. So
Mm.
it's a fun exercise to go through. I'm thinking about doing a workshop on it actually, because I don't think.
I can fully see you doing a workshop on that.
Yeah, it's
When you're
interesting
ready.
because I think it's one of those things. If you also have your list and you have those things ready and created, then you can turn to them much easier. If you don't have it and you're in the
Yes.
moment, you're just
Yeah.
like, what do I do? And then 10 minutes are gone.
Francis, when you have that ready and you're ready to launch it, I want you to come back and for us to have another conversation because this is
Okay.
just such a great conversation. And I love that idea of doing that. I also like the idea of leaving it open-ended, that I'm going to do a 10-minute something to celebrate, and then to wait in that moment and feel what that 10 minutes of celebration feels like. And to continue adding to the list is just brilliant. There's so many different reasons for the season also, right? Because there are
Right.
seasons where it's easier to do things than other seasons.
Correct. Yeah, when I have 18 inches of snow,
yes.
there's
And
no gardening.
there is. I
There's
agree.
indoor. I do have indoor plants,
Yes.
but it's not
Yes.
quite the
The
same.
little windowsill has lots and lots of little starters going, and added more this morning. But also on that, a friend of someone I've recently met is just retired from nursing and loved nursing. And she has decided to go back a few days a week, particularly in the wintertime, from the standpoint that the things that she loves to do are things that she doesn't have access to in the winter. And so she thought, you know what, I'm just going to keep my skills. I'm going to go back and continue working a few days a week, offer that, and not every day. So she's still retired, right? But I thought, oh, that's brilliant to be able to look at the things that bring her joy, look at the seasons and go, whoop, this doesn't match up. And she enjoyed who she worked with. She enjoyed all of that. She just thought that it was maybe time for her to go do something else. And so taking that time and listening and choosing to, to make a different decision on that.
Yes, that's true, because community can mean so much to so many people.
Yes.
Um, so it depends on your personality. I understand that because I am a community-based person. I am not an introvert, but the other two in my household are introverts, so it is interesting to be in that situation. But I understand, and I look for ways to do co-working or things, and I do. What can you do as a part of your business that gets you out and or retirement, whatever whatever it is you're doing that gets you with people, if that's part of what you need.
Yes. And I think the beautiful thing about technology and how many more people are using technology to connect through Zoom or through FaceTime or whatever it is whatever the platform happens to be able to find your people, I think is so much different than when my grandparents were living and even my great grandparents, right? I mean, the community was who you had living around you and that was it. And if you liked to woodwork and nobody else did, you were whittling by yourself.
Right.
And now you have people that you can connect with, you can find each other in different ways, or other people can recommend, and that you find them through that. And what a beautiful place that is. If you could ask anybody to be part of this conversation, and the person can be someone who's transitioned, somebody who's alive now, somebody who lives around the world, it can be anybody at all. Who would you want to have involved in this conversation that we're having right now?
So, Brene Brown.
Absolutely. Yes.
For one, I went to college in Texas, so there's a big part of my heart that is Texas and a Texan, and she's from Texas, but I love her work.
Yes.
And she very much, the gifts of imperfection is part of what changed my world and my thinking and my acceptance of myself ages ago. I think that book just had one of its anniversaries. I don't remember the year, but it's been around for a little while. But that's what I started with her, and I did her workshop from it, and it just changed. And then all of her talk on vulnerability has really allowed me to see myself differently and realize that one of the things I believe the world needs is for all of us to be more vulnerable, to be, with that comes some authenticity, but to be brave, to be willing to be ourselves and, ask hard questions of others, stand up to others, call others out in polite ways when perhaps they're just spouting opinion. I'm not sure how I want to say that, but anyway, I think I have not read all of her books, but I'm a huge fan of hers, and I believe a lot of what this conversation is centered on is around wholeheartedness and heart-centered and seeing people for who they are, and I think her work really touches on all of that, and she is a powerful voice for me, someone I'd love to meet, and so that's my celebrity ad.
Absolutely. Her work on vulnerability is one that really challenged me to begin talking about the fact that I had grown up in Africa. I had very much separated, right? That I was now here because it just felt like my opinions or how I see the world were just so different, having lived in different places, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I found it to be more comfortable to not talk about those things and to allow conversations to move into other areas, or for me to direct conversations into other areas. And I had to sit with that for a while. But speaking of daughters, it was my daughter who introduced me to Brene Brown, and the whole concept of vulnerability. And wow, that has really changed the trajectory of my life in such beautiful, positive ways. And it's, for me, part of that is about allowing myself that gift of, this is my story, my life, and the person listening doesn't have to necessarily like the decisions that I have made or where I grew up or anything about that, but finding the commonality of being someplace different, right? I mean, you growing up as an Army brat, as you said, you've moved around. You've had people in authority say, this is, you can't be here right now. You have to be someplace else. And I've gone through that. And so just that commonality of that is something that not everybody has experienced. And so to be able to be in that spaces of being able to listen, I think also was something that whole piece of vulnerability that she taught caused me to think about, how am I listening differently? So powerful.
I also thought she is extremely powerful in that she admits all along that she did the research. This isn't about her, and that it is hard for her to learn this and to adapt it and bring it into her life as it is for anybody. So she's very open and then very vulnerable herself around, just because this is what the data says doesn't mean that it was something that I was doing or was good at or any of that, that she constantly is working on that as well. And so that to me just made her different than so many others. And I think it's, teaching is one thing or sharing is one thing, but showing that we're all human and that, anyway, so that was one of the powerful things. And it's so funny that you asked when I brought it up, because in my office, this is the Teddy Roosevelt saying about the being in the arena.
Yes. Yes.
So that is in my office because that is an extremely powerful quote of being in the arena.
So powerful. As we are finishing up this conversation, this chapter, is there anything that you would like to reiterate for our viewers and listeners?
I would, even if you're not interested in accountability coaching or you're not sure, and you want to have a conversation, one of my goals for this year is to have and create 50, not just connections, but true deep connections, or ones that are not one time. So if you have interest in any part of this conversation and want to connect, actually, I don't know that I shared it, but I will get it to you. I offer and have a calendar where there's just an intro or a coffee chat. So I would just welcome the opportunity to connect if there's something that resonated that you'd like to have a conversation.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be that you want to work with me. So that's, to me, the power of community, and part of why I wanted to do this and have more visibility is learning from others, and those connections are really important to me, and it's a goal for this year to continue to make them. So please reach out.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that incredible offer. And I think that that is such a beautiful, huge goal that you have. And I
Yeah.
cheer you on in that, because you're going to have the most incredible conversations with people. And it's going to be, I'm excited for you. That is a fabulous goal.
It's fun learning from everybody, taking pieces. It keeps me energized. So that was one of my ways. We were talking about community. It's one
Yeah.
of my ways this year to expand community and to make something that feels authentic and has meaning to it.
Oh, beautiful. Well, we will have more conversations at other times, Frances. And
Thanks,
thank
Sarah.
you. Absolutely. And to our audience, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the end, and take Frances up on her offer for coffee online, so to speak. She is a delight to spend time with, to invest in yourself, to have that conversation. I just encourage